I watched a man in Siberian prison give up on meaning entirely. His name was Alexei. He had been sentenced to 20 years for a crime I never learned the details of. And when I first met him, he was still fighting, still angry, still believing his suffering meant something. But over the months I watched that belief drain away. Watched him stop caring whether he lived or died. Watched him stop believing anything mattered. And I watched him become something less than human. A body that kept moving but had no soul left inside. This is what nihilism does. This is what happens when you genuinely believe nothing has meaning. And what terrified me then, what still terrifies me now, is how easy it is to fall into that void. How quickly meaning can dissolve when you look at it too closely. How simple it is to convince yourself that everything you do is ultimately pointless. Let me tell you what nihilism actually is. Because people throw the word around without understanding what they're describing. Nihilism isn't just being sad or cynical or pessimistic. Nihilism is the belief that life has no inherent meaning, that there is no objective purpose, that all values are baseless, that nothing really matters in any ultimate sense. It's looking at the universe and seeing nothing but mechanical processes, looking at human life and seeing nothing but biological accidents stumbling toward death. Looking at morality and seeing nothing but social constructs we made up to feel better about our meaningless existence. And the dangerous thing about nihilism is that intellectually, it's hard to argue against. If you think clearly enough, if you follow logic far enough, if you strip away all comforting illusions, you can arrive at the conclusion that nothing objectively matters. That the universe doesn't care about human values. That in 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years everything you did will be forgotten and meaningless. That even if you achieve great things, even if you help people, even if you create beauty, eventually it all disappears into nothing. The sun will explode. The universe will die. And none of it will have mattered in any cosmic sense. This is what I was confronting in Siberia. Not just the physical suffering. Not just the cold and hunger and brutality. But the deeper question of whether any of it meant anything, whether my suffering served any purpose, whether human life in general had any value beyond what we desperately tell ourselves to avoid facing the void. And I watched men answer this question in different ways. Some found meaning through faith, some through hope of release, some through small acts of kindness in hell, and some, like Alexei, gave up completely. Decided that if life is just suffering leading to death, then why not just stop pretending it matters? Do you know what that looks like? A man who genuinely believes nothing matters? He doesn't kill himself. That would require caring enough to end things. He just stops trying, stops hoping, stops engaging with life in any meaningful way. He becomes a ghost, present but absent, breathing but not alive. And I saw this happen to Alexei over about 6 months. Watched the light go out of his eyes. Watched him stop talking. Watched him work mechanically without any spark of humanity. And when I tried to reach him, tried to pull him back, there was nothing to grab onto. He had gone somewhere I couldn't follow. Had crossed into a void where meaning doesn't exist. And I understood the temptation. God, I understood it. Because in those moments of deepest suffering, when your body is breaking and your spirit is crushed and you can't see any purpose to any of it, nihilism offers relief. It says stop fighting for meaning. Stop trying to make this make sense. Just accept that it's all meaningless and you can stop caring. You can stop hurting. You can just let go. And that release, that permission to stop caring, it's seductive. It's the easiest answer to suffering. Just declare that suffering doesn't matter because nothing matters. And suddenly the burden lifts. Suddenly you don't have to carry meaning anymore. But here's what I discovered. Here's what saved me from following Alexei into that void. Nihilism doesn't actually relieve suffering. It just removes your ability to find any purpose in it, so you still suffer. But now your suffering means nothing. You still feel pain. But now your pain serves no purpose. You still live. But now your life has no value. And that's worse than suffering with meaning. That's hell. That's what I saw in Alexei's eyes. Not peace, not relief, but a horror deeper than any physical torture. The horror of being alive while believing that being alive is meaningless. I created characters to explore this, to understand what nihilism does to the human soul. Ivan Karamazov says the line that everyone remembers. If God doesn't exist, everything is permitted. And people think this is about morality, about whether you can be good without religion. But it's deeper than that. It's about meaning. If there's no God, no ultimate authority, no cosmic purpose, then nothing you do matters in any ultimate sense. You can be good or evil and the universe doesn't care. You can create or destroy and it's all the same. You can love or hate and ultimately it makes no difference. Everything is permitted because nothing matters enough to be forbidden. And Ivan knows this logically. He's smart enough to follow the reasoning to its end. But he can't live with the conclusion. Can't actually function in a world without meaning. So he goes mad. His logical mind breaks him. Because humans aren't built to live without meaning. We need purpose. Need value. Need to believe that what we do matters. And when we can't find that meaning, when nihilism takes it away, we either find a way back or we break. There's no comfortable middle ground where you believe nothing matters and still function normally. Stavrogin in Demons is what happens when you don't break. When you fully embody nihilism and keep living. He's the most complete nihilist I ever created. He believes in nothing. Cares about nothing. Thinks everything is equally meaningless. And he's not depressed about it. He's not tortured by it. He's just empty. A void where a person should be. And he moves through the world doing things. Getting involved in revolutionary politics. Having relationships with women. Playing social roles. But none of it touches him. None of it matters to him. He's going through the motions of being human without any of the meaning that makes someone actually human. And everyone around him is destroyed by his emptiness. Because nihilism spreads. It's contagious. When you're near someone who genuinely believes nothing matters, it infects you. Makes you question your own beliefs. Makes your values feel naive. Makes your meaning feel like self-deception. And Stavrogin destroys person after person just by being near them. Not through active cruelty. Just through being a void that consumes meaning. And he knows this. Watches himself destroy others. And feels nothing. Because feeling requires believing that something matters. And he doesn't believe anything matters. Now let me tell you why this matters to you. Why I'm talking about characters and Siberian prisons and abstract philosophy. Because you're living in a world that breeds nihilism. That makes meaninglessness seem like the only honest position. You're told that the universe is just physics. That humans are just biology. That consciousness is just neurons firing. That love is just chemicals. That purpose is just evolutionary programming. That everything you feel and value and believe in is ultimately just matter moving according to natural laws with no meaning behind it. And if you're smart, if you think clearly, you can see that this might be true. That maybe we are just biological machines pretending we matter. That maybe meaning is just a story we tell ourselves because facing meaninglessness is too painful. That maybe nihilism is the only intellectually honest position and everything else is just comfortable delusion. And once you see this possibility, once you can't unsee it, you're in danger. You're standing at the edge of the void that swallowed Alexei. The void that drove Ivan mad. The void that made Stavrogin into something less than human. Let me tell you what I learned in Siberia that saved me from that void. I learned that whether or not meaning exists objectively doesn't matter as much as whether meaning exists for you. That the question isn't, does life have inherent cosmic purpose? The question is, can I create purpose in my life that makes living worthwhile? And the answer to that second question can be yes, even if the answer to the first question is no. You don't need the universe to care about your life for your life to be meaningful to you. You don't need cosmic validation for your values to be real values. You don't need objective purpose for your purpose to be genuine. This is what Alexei couldn't understand. What drove him into the void. He needed meaning to be guaranteed. Needed purpose to be universal. Needed the universe itself to validate that his life mattered. And when he couldn't find that validation, when he looked at the cold universe and saw nothing looking back, he concluded that therefore nothing matters. But he was wrong. Meaning doesn't have to be cosmic to be real. Purpose doesn't have to be universal to be genuine. Value doesn't have to be objective to be valuable. I had a conversation with another prisoner. A peasant who couldn't read. Who had no philosophy. Who didn't even understand the questions I was wrestling with. And I asked him how he found meaning in such a meaningless place. How he kept going when everything was suffering. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said he kept going because his wife and children needed him to survive. Because when he got out he wanted to see them again. Because even here, even in hell, sometimes he could help another prisoner and that felt good. Simple reasons. No cosmic justification. No philosophical framework. Just human reasons that mattered to him. And I realized he had something I had lost. He hadn't intellectualized himself out of meaning. Hadn't thought so much that thinking destroyed his capacity to value things. He just valued them. Just cared. Just found meaning in the immediate human reality of his life without needing the universe to tell him he was right to care. And this simple unreflective capacity to find meaning, it might be wiser than all my philosophy. Because meaning that survives intellectual scrutiny isn't more real than meaning that doesn't. It's just more defended. And sometimes defending meaning destroys it. Raskolnikov learns this. He creates a theory. A philosophical framework that justifies murder. That places him above ordinary morality. That makes his crime meaningful in some grand sense. And his theory is logically coherent. You can't actually refute it through pure reason. But it's still wrong. Not logically wrong. But wrong in some deeper human sense. Wrong because it violates something fundamental about being human. And when he kills based on this theory, when he acts out his nihilistic philosophy, it destroys him. Not because the theory was logically flawed, but because humans can't actually live according to theories that deny basic human values. And what saves him isn't better philosophy. Isn't a more sophisticated framework. It's Sonia. A simple girl who has suffered more than him but hasn't lost her capacity to love. Who has every reason to be nihilistic but isn't. Who just cares about him despite everything he's done. And her love, her simple direct human love, it breaks through his theory. Not by arguing against it, but by showing him that meaning exists in the lived reality of human connection even if it can't be philosophically justified. And gradually he learns to value that meaning. To trust it. To build his life on it even though he can't prove it's objectively valid. This is the answer to nihilism that I discovered. Not through philosophy but through suffering. Not through argument but through experience. Meaning doesn't have to be provable to be real. Value doesn't have to be objective to be valuable. Purpose doesn't have to be cosmic to be purpose. And the fact that the universe might not care about human life doesn't make human life meaningless to humans. We care. That's enough. That has to be enough. Because the alternative is Alexei's fate. Is becoming a void. Is living while dead. But here's the difficult part. Here's what makes this hard. You can't just decide to believe meaning exists. You can't just choose to care. It doesn't work that way. If you've seen through to meaninglessness, if you've genuinely understood that nothing objectively matters, you can't just unsee it. You can't just go back to naive belief. The void doesn't let you go that easily. And this is where most people get stuck. They understand intellectually that nihilism is destructive, that they need meaning to live well. But they can't make themselves believe in meaning because belief requires something beyond intellectual assent. So what do? How do you escape nihilism once you've seen into the void? This is what I wrestled with for years. What I put into every character who struggled with meaninglessness. And the answer I found is that you don't escape through thinking. You escape through doing. Through acting as if meaning exists even when you can't prove it does. Through choosing to value things even when you can't justify why they should be valued. Through creating purpose through your actions rather than discovering purpose through your thoughts. In Siberia, I couldn't prove my suffering had meaning. Couldn't construct a logical argument for why I should keep hoping. Couldn't find cosmic validation for my values. But I acted as if they mattered anyway. Helped other prisoners when I could. Maintained my dignity when it would have been easier to give up. Refused to let the suffering destroy my capacity to love even though love might be just chemicals and evolutionary programming. And through acting this way, meaning emerged. Not as an intellectual conclusion, but as a lived reality. As something I created through choosing to care even when caring couldn't be justified. This is what Father Zosima teaches in the Brothers Karamazov. He tells people to practice active love. Not to philosophize about whether love is meaningful. Not to construct theories about purpose. Just to love actively. To help people. To show compassion. to create meaning through action rather than trying to discover it through thought. And this works, not because it proves meaning exists objectively, but because it creates meaning subjectively. Because meaning is something humans make through living, not something we find through analyzing. The underground man can't do this. Can't act without first having perfect intellectual justification. So he remains trapped, paralyzed by overthinking, unable to create meaning because he needs to understand meaning before he'll commit to it. And he's miserable. More miserable than the simple people he despises, because they can create meaning through living while he can only destroy meaning through thinking. And his consciousness, his precious awareness, it becomes a curse. It gives him the capacity to see meaninglessness but takes away his capacity to create meaning. And he ends up with the worst of both. Aware enough to suffer from meaninglessness but not wise enough to create meaning despite it. Don't be the underground man. Don't let thinking destroy your capacity for meaning. Don't require cosmic validation before you allow yourself to value things. Don't demand philosophical justification before you let yourself care. Because if you do, you'll end up in the void. You'll become like Alexei, like Stavrogin, a ghost moving through life without any real life in you. And that fate, I'm telling you from watching it happen to men I knew, that fate is worse than death. Because at least death ends. But being alive while meaningless, being conscious while in the void, that's a suffering that continues as long as you breathe. Now let me tell you something that might make you uncomfortable. Something I learned that goes against what intellectuals usually say. Sometimes it's better to believe a useful falsehood than to know a destructive truth. If believing life has meaning makes you able to live well, and believing life is meaningless makes you unable to live at all, then the smart choice is to believe in meaning even if you can't prove it's true. This isn't intellectual cowardice. It's practical wisdom. It's choosing life over logic. It's recognizing that humans need meaning to function and that creating meaning is more important than being right about whether meaning exists objectively. Ivan Karamazov can't do this. He's too honest, too committed to following logic wherever it leads. And his honesty destroys him, makes him unable to function, drives him mad. And at the end of his intellectual journey, after proving to his own satisfaction that God doesn't exist and nothing matters, he has nothing. No purpose. No values, no reason to keep living. Just the cold logical truth that his brilliant mind has discovered. And that truth, true or not, makes living impossible. So what good is it? What's the value of a truth that destroys your capacity to live? This is what I'm trying to tell you. If you're wrestling with nihilism, if you're staring into the void and wondering if anything really matters, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether things matter objectively. The question is whether you can create a life where things matter to you. Whether you can construct meaning that allows you to live well even if that meaning can't be philosophically defended. Whether you can care about things even if caring is just biology. Whether you can find purpose even if purpose is just something humans invented. And I'm telling you that you can. That many people do. That I did. Not by proving meaning exists, but by creating it. By choosing to value things even without cosmic validation. By acting as if purpose matters even when I couldn't prove it does. By loving even though love might be just chemicals. By hoping even though hope might be just self-deception. By finding beauty even though beauty might be just subjective preference. And through these choices, through these actions, meaning emerged in my life. Real meaning. Meaningful meaning. Even if it couldn't be justified philosophically. But you have to make the choice. Have to decide whether you want to be right about meaninglessness or whether you want to live well. Because you probably can't have both. If you're intellectually honest enough, rigorous enough, clear-thinking enough, you can arrive at nihilism. Can prove to yourself that nothing objectively matters. Can see through all comforting illusions. And if you do that, if you achieve that clarity, you'll be right. You'll have seen true. But you'll also be miserable. Because humans can't live well without meaning even if meaning is illusion. So choose. Choose whether you want intellectual purity or meaningful life. Choose whether you want to be the person who sees through everything or the person who can still value things. Choose whether you want to be Ivan or Alyosha. Because Ivan is smarter, sees more clearly, thinks more deeply. But Alyosha lives better, suffers less, creates more meaning. And at the end of the novel, After all Ivan's brilliant reasoning, Alyosha's simple faith has served him better. Not because it's more intellectually defensible, but because it allows him to live. This is my final word on nihilism. On the void that almost swallowed me. On the meaninglessness that destroys so many smart people. You can't think your way out of it. Can't argue yourself back to meaning. Can't construct a logical proof that defeats it. Because nihilism is logically coherent. You can't refute it through pure reason. You can only escape it through action. Through choosing to create meaning even when you can't prove meaning exists. Through caring even when caring can't be justified. Through loving even when love might be illusion. Through living as if life matters even when you can't be certain it does. And if you do this, if you make this choice, you won't have certainty. Won't have proof. Won't have the comfort of knowing you're absolutely right. But you'll have something better. You'll have a life worth living. You'll have purpose that makes getting up each morning possible. You'll have meaning that makes suffering bearable. And that practical livable meaning, it's worth more than any amount of intellectual purity. It's worth more than being right about the void. It's worth more than seeing clearly into meaninglessness. Because you're not here to be right. You're here to live. And living requires meaning even if meaning requires some degree of self-deception. Choose life. Choose meaning. Choose to care even if you can't justify caring. Because the alternative is Alexei's fate, is the void, is being conscious while dead. And I've seen that fate. I've watched men fall into it. And I'm telling you, with everything I learned in Siberia, with everything I put into decades of writing, with everything I understand about human nature, that you don't want to go there. That meaninglessness is worse than any illusion. That the comfort of meaning, even unjustified meaning, beats the horror of seeing through to nothing. So if nothing feels meaningful to you right now, if you're staring into the void wondering if anything actually matters, stop thinking and start doing. Help someone. Create something. Love someone. Not because you can prove these things matter objectively, but because doing them creates meaning subjectively. Because meaning is made through living, not discovered through thinking. And once you start making meaning through action, it becomes real enough to sustain you. Real enough to make life worth living. Real enough to keep you out of the void that swallowed Alexei and broke Ivan and turned Stavrogin into a ghost. The void is always there. Always available. Always ready to swallow anyone who looks too long. But you don't have to enter it. Don't have to stay in it. Don't have to let it define your life. You can choose meaning. Can create purpose. Can make your life matter even if the universe doesn't care. And that choice, that active creation of meaning in the face of potential meaninglessness, that's the most human thing there is. That's what separates us from Alexei's fate. That's what makes life worth living even in a universe that might not care whether we live or die.